Hey, what's up, guys? What is this? What magazine is this? Every now and then I like to grab this. It's actually a decent price for the amount of stuff you got. Cineaste, eh? Film criticism. Obviously, it's very leftist, to say the least. And the reason I focus on here, there's a horror thing in here that I want to go over, since keeping with the themes I do. But I just thought it was interesting as a segue. I told you that, 100 years ago I would be a leftist. And it's always interesting to see. I can sort of deal with this older left in terms of engaging their ideas, as opposed to the stuff today, which is literally just corporate capitalist, SJW woke, transhumanism, whatever you want to call it. It is an entity that is only deserving to be mocked and to not be engaged with in any serious manner. And I saw this is sort of a historical footnote at this point, because these people are also going away. But I thought it was interesting, the editorial, they mentioned the problem of populist, very populist, a populist left, right? The problem with populist cinema is that, right, indeed one of the most problematic issues, and perhaps the most difficult to acknowledge, is that despite these filmmakers aim to create a populist cinema, socially conscious cinema has never been a popular one. Right, and they're acknowledging, at least they're not doing the usual, which is like, oh, the masses, the false consciousness, whatever. The masses of people, the common man, okay, who I don't romanticize, but I don't, I obviously in that sphere. They want to be entertained. They're working people, right? Right, the mass movie going audience, time again, they are not interested in films that reflect their everyday lives or remind them of problems of which they are painfully aware. So they're trying to understand the fact why, rather than using the false consciousness argument of these people. I mean, in terms of other things that proved popular, the working common man, other ideas appeal to them more than their Marxist, leftist ideas, at least after a certain time in history, let's say. And they've never forgiven that, as you see throughout. There's always references to the war, right? This is interesting there, but I'll just finish with, right, this has always been the issue, okay? Whether with movements, left-wing movements, and Marxist movements, whatever you want to call them, you never have people from the working class, the common mass person in those. Okay, you have intellectuals, you have upper middle class, bourgeois people who are privileged, people whose families have money, who go to university. These are the people. So you sort of, you're making these films like the same, in a similar way of what they do now. You're doing it for your peers. You're doing it to show your how cool you are, or your virtue, or you think you're gonna change the world. Meanwhile, you only, in a way, you're eradicating what little is left between the people, whatever that means, and these systems of control, which no matter what, there's always going to be power operating on people, being utilized by other people. That's the only thing I keep saying you can know in existence for sure. Okay, and it's interesting here at the end of it, right? Of course, they try to keep on that reality that they at least honestly acknowledge is because the people making it are not of that class. I mean, they're talking about the working common class people as the other. Okay, they acknowledge that they are not these people. Right? And I'm not even bringing up the other facets of it. I'm just keeping it direct here. Right. Keeping with the spirit and editorial credo, we gladly continue to promote and support the work of those filmmakers striving to create, in the very words that define democracy, a cinema of the people, by the people, and for the people. And of course, the reality is the people. What the hell is the people? Right? What people? Which people are you talking about? There is no the people. Okay, isn't that the whole crux of everything? Anyway, I'll just go through some real quick, using the power of editing. I'm just gonna go briefly. I'm gonna do a separate video for the horror thing because that's more my focus. But it's interesting with this magazine. It's like the old romantic, socialist, leftist sort of thing. So you're always gonna have stuff on this. Still making movies about this period that's romanticized. You know, interesting. Shout out Super 8 film, but neorealism. Listen, you have Marxist dudes make like Visconti make actually visually wonderful, beautiful films about more interesting things than this. Of course, you're always gonna, like I said, you're gonna always keep focusing on this stuff, right? They're never gonna forgive the people for going when they had it when they wanted to go for somebody. Okay, they went for these guys or other nationalists. Okay? They're never gonna forgive the people. But here's where I saw other thing, the return of the Wobblies, right? There was a documentary on the Wobblies, right? The IWW, right? The industrial workers of the world, right? I'm a fan of them. I'll tell you, I'm a leftist. Until 1922, something happens in 1922 where my focus would change a little bit, right? But the Wobblies, man, these people had guts, and the reviewer makes a good point here. The radicals who joined the IWW were not academics or intellectuals like the people who make this magazine. They were actually working class people, and they had guts. Okay, of course, they wanted to overthrow capitalism, right? The whole idea was the whole world would have a general strike, right? George Sorel, the syndicalism, radical syndicalism. There would be a worldwide strike, right, which would throw the capitalists into chaos. And like I said, you had this stuff. This was before the First War, okay? I like the whole. It's talk about doomed romanticism is right. They were rebellious slaves, which is nothing more dangerous than a rebellious slave. In history, not particularly. Slave rebellions almost never work. Okay. Or things that are formed by former military men who are not slaves or workers or servants, but warriors. That's a different story. But anyway, even that didn't succeed though against the world Leviathan, the capitalist world. So pretty much they're just talking about it. I want to check this out. I want to get this because I'm very much listen. These sons of bitches, if they could, they'd have you working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week if they could. Okay, and it's interesting when they go here. Yeah, World War One, the anti-war activities of other people screwed them. The IWW actually didn't say much about the war that Wilson had started. I recommend a book which you can get free. You can read it free PDF. War Socialism, right, by Murray Rothbard. That's right. I like Rothbard. Big Bill Haywood had to flee to the Soviet Union. Okay? Of course, then when the Soviet Union became more popular than this stuff, and people became communists. Remember, you had the Socialist Party of America, right? Norman Thomas. They were actually not fans of the communists, and there was a lot of interesting stories about that. But regardless, it's all history now. Okay, just to wrap this little thing up here. Okay, you have a modern writer talking about something from 100 years ago. Okay, so what do you think is going to happen? Just like the other things I'm showing you, when they talk about things, films or whatever, or books from 100 years ago, Nosferatu, or Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad, there's going to be a criticism there because of what? Well, let's see. Okay, warm, loving, and inspirational as the Wobblies is, it's hard to see how the IWW set a model of labor organizing applicable today. The working class, what's left of it, assiduously avoids joining unions. Wow, shit, unions. Okay, the union heads almost always in cahoots with management. They want you to vote for people who are for values that are totally against what most working class people are, and in the industrial capacity is almost entirely gone now. So it's a much different world. But this is the point here: the white Man, I gotta keep focusing on this. The white men and women who were rebels against the established order in the early 20th century wanted a world in which the workers ruled. It's not inconceivable that some of their grand and great grandchildren stormed the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. The IWW's dream of a multiracial struggle remains just that. What the hell are you talking about? Well, I know exactly what they're talking about. You know what they're talking about, right? This is what I'm talking about from the very beginning, okay? The people writing this have nothing in common with actual working people, the actual mass American of now, okay? And they're trying to imply that these people, the Trump supporters, were the R word, okay? When we saw that the MAGA people were anything but that. All right, and the IWW was 97% white. That they allowed there were black members from Philly, which was good. I have nothing but sympathy for the Wobblies. Okay, and like just a real quick, they stuff that was done to them, and the government went all in on them hard, man, and mobs too. The American Legion, right, which is now fading away. They used to beat slackers in the street, people who were against the war, but also they would fight with the Wobblies. I think there was a bunch of them were murdered. There was one that was castrated in, I think, Colorado. Okay, so these people really suffered a lot to have this person, say, well, they were okay, but they were white, and their descendants, almost overthrew the country. Anyway. And real quick, just to end this before I get to the horror thing, what is it? Come on, you're gonna do this to me. What is it? Talking about these Spanish, this fucking guy, Pedro Almodovar, right? This shit sucks. And I tell you, I like Spanish cinema, okay? It's very anti-Franco. Look at this. Holding photos, the commemorating victims of Franco's forces during the Civil War. Right, like it was a one-sided thing, okay? You hate the guy, right? His reign of terror because he won. Or they didn't let their country be taken over by communists who killed plenty of people before the tide turned on them. It's interesting. Also, all filmmaking schools were closed in '67. Good. Meanwhile, you still had great films, especially the horror films coming out in the '60s and the '70s. Okay, all the Spanish government wanted you to do was not show nudity. You could shoot nude scenes, but they had to be exported to Germany and France and America and all these other places. Okay, the best films were coming out when Franco was still alive. So, yeah, I showed you that story with Helga Line, where she was in some kind of political play and she got arrested by the Franco regime. And she spent like a day or less than a day at the friggin' police thing, and they let her go. So, and then once the Spanish film industry was dominated, just as the country was, by the left. They just make garbage ass movies, man. Fuck that guy, Pedro Almodovar. So, anyway.